Welcome into the Bobby Carpenter Show. And big Wednesday here, right in the midst of Big Ten Media Days, here with my guy, Steele Chambers. We're joined by Bill Bender of the Sporting News, who joins us each and every week so graciously, and one of the great national writers you're going to find. So check his stuff out at Bill Bender 92 on X, and it's his stuff at the Sporting News, which is always so great. So coming out of the SEC Media Days last week, the Big Ten, which the timing of this, Bill, is always so unique because you want to kind of be the last to go, maybe get the last word in, but also you want to make sure that you have your own platform. We've got NFL training camps that are coming up, so I feel like that might be starting today. It's kind of conflicting a little bit with this and maybe gobbling up some of the headlines. But I guess coming out of, because we talked to you a little earlier last week, coming out of the SEC Media Days, what were the big themes you were seeing as you're taking this into that final week before camp starts?
Yeah, SEC was full of quotable coaches. They were loose, whether it was Pete Golding or Josh Heupel or Lane Kiffin. There was a lot of quote-worthy material, more than usual, coming out of the SEC. And then, like you said, the Big Ten gets the last word. And I thought Tony Petitti yesterday used that platform to promote, I would use the word promote, the SEC rivalry with the SEC. And they can do that because obviously the Big Ten's on top right now. It's easy to promote that rivalry when you're standing on a podium next to 3 national championship trophies. And I think that was 100% by design. But I thought, Bobby, he used that podium, that pulpit, to continue to promote the 2014 playoff. I mean, that really seems to be the message that Tony Petitti is hammering in there as much as he can, that they're not even considering anything else. They're really dead set with the messaging to try to promote this 2014 playoff.
Is there a reason you think that that's what he used to stand for? You saw the SEC, that was just a lot more, I guess, a lot more fluff, a lot more kind of gossip going on over there. Is this his chance to say, like, hey, we are on board with this? We need the SEC to kind of work in lockstep with us?
Well, I think he threaded the needle between the on-field part, which is what, the fans care about. And quite frankly, I care about more, is, those matchups between the SEC and the Big Ten. From years of the BCS era, the SEC dominating college football, and this back and forth of how do you measure the strength of a conference. And I still hang it on. At the end of the day, it's about who's holding up that trophy. We can do bowl records. And, I found it interesting, Steele, the last 3 years, the SEC and Big Ten have played 25 head-to-head games. It's either, make sure I'm right on this, 25, and it's 13-12 SEC. Okay, so it's a 1-game difference between the two conferences. You could do the non-conference metrics, the bowl records, but at the end of the day, it's about Michigan, Ohio State, Indiana holding up those trophies. That's how the SEC built the national championship reputation. And the records, honestly, if you go all the way through the BCS era, there's not a lot of separation. It's, the SEC's got a slight advantage head to head, but it's not like a wide gulf in the record between the two conferences.
Were you surprised that Tony Petitti leaned into that a little bit this time, Bill? Because typically he's never really addressed. He's got up there and kind of talked about, hey, the group of the conference and all this, but he kind of leaned in on, hey, we'd love to play him more. We'd love it. Yeah, the fans see it as kind of a rivalry, and leaned into some of that, maybe more so than he's ever done in the past.
Right. Well, yeah, and a small correction, it's 12-11 SEC, not 13-12. So, either way, right? We're separated by 1 game, but I think you can when you're on top. And I think the fact that, like he said, one of the things he defended about the Big Ten that I thought was really interesting is that he said our teams are ready, more prepared for the college football playoff when they get in it because of the travel, because they play a cross-country schedule. I didn't even think about that. Indiana's path last year, they flew out to Pasadena, they flew to Atlanta, they flew to Miami, and that was their path. That's a lot of miles in the airplane, but they were prepared through the schedule they played. Granted, Indiana's Big Ten schedule was a little softer last year, but the point stands. I think when you go through, Tony Petitti's probably tired of hearing that the middle and the lower end of the Big Ten are terrible when, I think with Michigan and Penn State, and even Wisconsin, who generated some buzz yesterday as a potential sleeper team with Luke Fickell going into that Notre Dame game. I think the meat of the Big Ten, the middle of it, might be a little better.
Talk about that buzz with Wisconsin, because they've had a chance to maybe move on from Luke Fickell instead of paying, a $30 million buyout. It's like, hey, let's double down and invest and see if he can do something when he's actually fully funded and has resources. I mean, do we feel like that buzz is worthy of that?
Yeah, they were playing catch up. I think it's already tough to recruit at Wisconsin in some ways. Barry Alvarez found a way all the way back to him where they found a way. They found their identity through huge offensive linemen, leaning on them and running the football. And Luke, we know he can coach and build a winner. He did that at Cincinnati. Look at the talent development he had at Cincinnati and how many draft picks they had on those teams that went to the college football playoff and played Alabama tough, but had a thorough run of success. It's taken a little bit longer at Wisconsin. I was so happy they retained him because I think it does start at quarterback. They bring in a transfer quarterback from Old Dominion. Their offense needs to be better. And they did, in fairness, and I'm not making excuses. Wisconsin, go look at their schedule last year and tell me anybody would have had success against that between playing Oregon, Michigan, Ohio State, Indiana, Iowa, and it was all in succession. So
they played Alabama. They played Notre Dame.
My gosh.
They got the hardest conference of the last 5 years. I felt bad for Fick.
Yeah, exactly. So you're going up against that schedule too. And I think he's one of the genuine good guys in the sport. I hope he has success at Wisconsin. I'm allowed to root for certain coaches. He's one of them that I do because he's a real genuine person. Doesn't make excuses either. I remember them asking about the schedule and he just said, hopefully if we have success, we're rewarded for it. So, really good guy. And again, they have generated some buzz. Maybe they make a little run into that second tier of the Big Ten, the higher second tier.
I hope they do, because my time there, I just know Wisconsin, like you said, they're big, tough dudes up front. They got running backs in the stable. They're always a solid team. Bobby, were they good whenever you were playing them? I don't really know the history of Wisconsin too well.
It was a huge rivalry, Steele. I mean, Bill can remember this. When I got to Ohio State, this is God's honest truth, they had won. I think they won here, and then we won there. And, they danced on the block O, and then after the game, OSU danced on the W. We went and played them in 2003 or 2. We played up there in 2, 3, and then played them at home in 4, and we lost to them in 3 and 4. The only team in the Big Ten I have a losing record against. We didn't play them my senior year, but C. Grant gets up before we're playing them, Bill. It's Thursday night. He's like, we're going to go up to Madison, and we're going to whoop their ass, and we're going to dance on the W. And Tress is over the corner, no, it's not. We're not going to be about that. This is not what we're going to do. But it was a huge deal because they were the bully on the block. They were physical. They were kind of Michigan adjacent with how they played. And, they had a lot of Ohio guys. You look at some of their best players like Lee Evans, Chris Chambers were receivers out of Michigan that ended up being first-round draft picks. They would get the second-tier kid out of Ohio, develop those guys. And, Bill, it almost seems like this because the other team that used to be really good that in the 90s and even the early 2000s, wears red and white as well, is Nebraska. And it seems like the pathway for Nebraska and Wisconsin, Nebraska has more resources, maybe a similar recruiting base, but it seems like the pathway for the Big Ten to be as deep as the SEC, those two teams have to be good, and they probably have to be good, Bill, in almost the same way.
Oh, I agree. And Nebraska, if you ask me, okay, which one has the better path this year? I mean, Nebraska probably is the answer, but they need Anthony Calandria, a UNLV transfer, to be very good. And Matt Rule needs to continue to take steps. They just need to win a big game. They've got that streak of losses against ranked teams hanging over them. And, it's ironic that you mentioned those two teams. Remember, there was a time when they were playing in the Big Ten championship game against each other. A Bo Pelini coach team, Nebraska team with Martinez played Wisconsin in that game, and Wisconsin's identity was a little more established. But the crazy part to me of all of it is Iowa is ahead of both of them with Kirk Ferentz and his, he was out on the podium yesterday with the same one-liners and the same steel trap memory of he can pull up a file in his head from a game in 2003 and know exactly what the situation is.
Philly had issues elsewhere last year that were on full display in the playoff game against the Niners. They couldn't move the ball all game, and then they got in a 2-minute hurry-up drill, and they walked right down the field. Guys, Tom Brady would do Eagle games. Every single week he'd go, gosh, if they do some hurry-up. And then immediately they'd do some hurry-up, 2-minute warning, and they'd look like a completely different football team.
In-game live, only on SportsGrid.
You know, the dark days are ahead for the Warriors. And when Curry and Kerr and Draymond all leave, what are we going to be looking at that franchise that has been a mainstay of the NBA, you know, the face of the NBA and NBA playoffs for so long? Where are they going to be? So I see no issue with them bringing Draymond back. Why not? You have one last go at things with the trio that they still have there. But I see this as a very long season.
Game time decisions, only on SportsGrid.
Just can't win the big game. He can't get us in the big game. Well, we got to let him go now because we're tired. We'll keep the quarterback. So, you know what I've been saying? Okay, you kept the quarterback. Guess what? Mr. Lamar Jackson, it's on you now.
Hey,
it's on you.
Absolutely.
Right? It's on Lamar.
It is. It is totally on him now and the new coaching staff there.
Outspoken with Dan Cilio, only on SportsGrid.
I'd be looking to sell Louis Varland at this point just because his success has been great, but I'm also worried about how many more opportunities he's going to have given the dynamic of where the Blue Jays sit in the standings. You know, we've heard some rumors that they may be wanting to trade Jeff Hoffman, and it could open up a lot of opportunities for Louis Varland, but there's also nothing pushing the Blue Jays to continuously have out a great player when they're fighting for nothing when it's all said and done.
Pro Baseball Today, only on SportsGrid.
All right, welcome back in the Bobby Carpenter Show. We got our guy Bill Bender here, as we do every week, Steele Chambers. And Bill, one of the things they were saying, and it's always been a narrative, yeah, the Big Ten's really good at the top. And Craig Sankey was arguing like the middle, because you can't say you're the best when you've lost 3 in a row. Like it's hard to argue that. So then he kind of attacked the middle of the Big Ten, which is what we were kind of talking about, the Nebraska, like, because you have that second tier right now. Penn State, USC, Michigan's kind of oscillating back and forth. But that's kind of your next 3 teams. And maybe even Iowa is in that mix to a certain extent. And then you start looking at Washington, but then it's like, hey, the Wisconsins, the Nebraskas, you know, Minnesota, Illinois, like how good are those schools? But then you get to the bottom. And the question is for me always is like in the SEC, like South Carolina, there's years where they believe they can win the SEC championship. Vanderbilt last year believed they could. They had a shot at winning it. Auburn, who's been, you know, won national championships, but also has been kind of down at times. You know, they thought they could do it. And you always look around and who are the teams that are struggling? There's always these cycles. I mean, there's been some teams that have been down for close to 20 years outside of intermittent boosts in the Big Ten. And Tony Petitti was actually asked about that. And his response, Bill, was crazy because usually you talk about, well, we're always trying to get parity. We want like an NFL model where everybody's good. And he basically said, like, there's some teams they're just not going to be very good. Like, he was very matter of fact that no matter what you do, like, there's always going to be teams that struggle no matter the investment. And he didn't put anybody's name on it, but it was crazy to hear him actually, Bill, kind of admit and cop to the fact that, like, I mean, Purdue's been Purdue for a while. If they want to get out of it, they can. Indiana did. Maryland, kind of the same. Rutgers, like some of these schools, it's their choice and their option to try to ascend.
Well, Maryland should be better given the high school football in that area. And, you know, they should be a little bit more of a player. But that bottom third of the Big Ten can be problematic, you know, whether it's Maryland or Rutgers or Purdue. There have been some miserable Purdue teams the last couple of years. But like you said, it's on them to pull themselves out of it. Will Michigan State, they've kind of slipped into that third. And I'm wondering with Pat Fitzgerald, who will be up on the podium today, if that changes. I think Pat I'm glad he's back in the Big Ten. I'm glad he's coaching again. I think he's been the ultimate do more with less kind of coach. And that, I think he will change the culture at Michigan State, but it's not going to be an overnight deal, right? That's going to take them a couple years to build that program back to even close to what it was under Mark D'Antonio, who was the best coach they've had in such a long time. But yeah, I mean, to his point, the dirty secret of college football sometimes is that you want a couple schools out front that are just head and shoulders better than everybody else. They can get you into a national championship type scenario. And I think in the Big Ten, as Jake Butt said yesterday on the telecast, the top three are kind of the kings of college football in some ways, whether it's Indiana or Ohio State coming off the national titles. Oregon, tremendous amount of pressure for the Ducks to go get theirs, but they are a national championship contender. You can't say they aren't. And I found it interesting, Bob, that those three schools I just mentioned, Ohio State, Indiana, Oregon, top three schools with the most wins of the last 2 seasons. Notre Dame is 4th. Then you get into everybody else. So I think that's the pressure point on the SEC.
Do you see this being a reason for him bringing up the 2014 playoffs for all those middle of the pack teams, maybe in teams in the bottom third, where if there's a 2014 playoff, maybe there's a little more incentive to push a little more money to the football team. So, I mean, if you get to an 8-5, 9-3 season, maybe you're able to squeeze in there. If you're, I don't know, a Purdue that just has some crazy years, that may be why he's bringing up that 2014 playoff.
Well, yeah, and we looked up the hypothetical Steele. If there were a 2014 playoff the last 12 years, Iowa would have been in 6 times. A school like NC State would have been in 6 times. And those are exactly the schools you're talking about, where Dave Doran's had a lot of 9-4 seasons at NC State. Solid teams, tough out to play there. Been down to that stadium before. It's not easy to win there. Same thing with Kinnick, right? You go to Kinnick, it's not an easy game. Oregon and Indiana found that out firsthand. But the 2014 playoff is built for schools like that, where an NC State or an Iowa or a Pitt, Penn State would be a playoff regular in that format. I still think James Franklin would have his job if we had been in a 2014 playoff the last 12 years. I still don't love it. I get why he's selling it. I get the money, and it's going to replace the conference championship games. But I'm still a fan of make the playoff just a touch more exclusive. If we went to 16, I could live with that. 24, I feel like I'll adjust to it and learn like everything else, and you'll learn to love it in some ways. But I still feel like it's too many teams.
I think 16 is a good number. It doesn't substantially change the format right now, which I like. You keep it fairly consistent, and then everybody can get a home game. The thing that I was thinking about, Bill, is with this, there's 2 teams this year that got left out, that in Texas and Notre Dame, that I think could have conceivably won the national championship. But very rarely when teams get left out, do you think this team deserves to be in versus this team can actually go win it. And part of it is the format this year, in the past of who got in, who was left out. And, I know like people are like, well, maybe 8 was the number. I'm like, well, Miami was 10th and they could have very easily won. I mean, they're probably a blocked punt away from finding a way to win that game. And when you have the subjectivity of the ranking system like you do, and this is what people look at the NFL, look at these pro sports league, but they all play each other. Number one, there's much more schedule congruency, and there's no rankings. Like there's tiebreakers because you have fairly similar schedules, and you're all on the same platitude. So you need a little bit of that subjectivity. But I just, even after probably 14, 15, 16, 17, but I don't know that I want to see teams playing that could potentially knock off, because everybody talks about the Cinderellas that could knock off one of the best teams, but they're not probably going to be able to win another game. Football is way different than basketball in that, where it's really hard to be a true Cinderella when you're at a talent deficit to try to win more than 1 or potentially 2 games. And so I don't want to see teams that have no ability to actually win more than a game probably get in.
Right. And the definition of Cinderella is very sliding in college football. We were trying to call Miami Cinderella last year by name a 10 seed, but when your Cinderella has Reuben Bain coming off one edge and Akeem Messidor coming off the other, and Malachi Toney, and the amount of talent that they had, they were basically an ACC champion that didn't get a chance to play for the ACC championship game, which is another entire segment probably of why that happened. But yeah, I totally agree with your point. The 2 now last year, I do think that the 4 teams that would have made a 16-team playoff, it would have been Texas, it would have been Notre Dame, it would have been BYU, who I think was deserving at least of a playoff berth.
Yeah.
When you win double-digit games the way that they have the last 2 years, and then Vandy, who probably would have been around a 14 seed, then we would have got to see, Diego Pavia play against a Georgia or not a Georgia, but have the opportunity in a 16-team field to play against an Ohio State or a Georgia, which would have been very exciting to see.
Welcome back into the Bobby Carpenter Show, and we hadn't even gotten into this yet, and it's kind of the big news of the day. Should be coming down later. I guess there's an apparent deadline with this, and hopefully going to have one of our congressmen on tomorrow to be able to talk a little bit more about it and break down how we got to where we are and to see if actually anything transpired, Bill. But, reportedly Big Ten and the SEC were kind of on board. There was like a 9-hour phone call, which – well, I've never been on a 9-hour phone call. That's so exhausting. I don't know what you're even talking about, but trying to help figure out what's going to be in it. Because I've contested as soon as they started adding all this crap in there outside of maybe some sort of revenue cap, eligibility requirements, and limits, and then limits on transfers. Like those are things that people can kind of get behind. And maybe even some timeline stuff about when they can play. And Congress, if you want to throw in there, like give college football another weekend back in November or December that they can keep again. But that was kind of it. Like, where do you kind of see this thing going as we're probably going to hear this news at some point Wednesday afternoon?
Yeah, it sounds like we just talked about all the stuff on the field with the SEC and the Big Ten. Off the field, collaborative. Sounds like they do actually work together. It's kind of like, behind the scenes, Greg Sankey and Tony Petitti, not talking about the playoff here, but just those issues that they want for this Protects College Sports Act, they're working together on. And it's because I think those conferences know that they're drawing in the most revenue, that they make the most money, that they have the most interest to TV numbers, and they want to be on the same playing field in terms of how they're handling their business moving forward. Now, will this thing pass? You'll have to save that one for tomorrow. I have no idea. I can't predict politics, and I don't try to. But I think the fact that those two conferences are working together, maybe that sounds the alarm a little bit that, again, I don't know if it'll pass, but we're headed in the right direction where we're doing more than just talking about it and using phrases like Wild Wild West. We're actually trying to do some things that will protect, quite literally, the long-term future of the sport.
Yeah, and Bobby alluded to it. Like, there's a lot going on in that Protect College Sports Act. He was trying to describe some of it to me in the Ross Dellinger tweet, and it went right over my head. Like, I was having a hard time keeping up. So I imagine it might be the same for them. So I just say, like, eat an elephant one bite at a time. Maybe this next year you start working on the schedule. The next year you start working on transfer portal. Like, you just do it like one step, and then sooner rather than later, like, the sport is going to be somewhat fixed. You can't just completely fix college football in one particular season. So I say you just take your time. There's a lot of stuff going on within it. That's probably why teams are scared, because it's a lot of change, like right off the bat. So just take your time. I see possibly a future where you can get this done, but it's going to take baby steps. You can't do it all just in one fell swoop.
Well, and some of it's about the money. I know we were going to at least maybe touch on it, but, yesterday the big news also was jersey patches and schools coming up with multi-million-dollar deals, whether it was Ohio State with JP Morgan Chase or Notre Dame with SoFi. We did a fun article at Sporting News where we gave some other schools some suggestions for who they should get their patch with. A couple. The one that I had the most fun with is I did not realize that Texas and Tito's Homemade Vodka was a Austin, Texas-based company. So, I mean, that seems like a natural patch for the Longhorns to put on their jersey. But there is the old guard that will get upset about that. But the reality about it is, one, it's just a patch. And to me, it is just a patch. And if that patch can bring in some players or something that helps your school win a national championship, you're not going to argue about it for very long. You've been in these stadiums, guys, where you see all the sponsorships, and part of it is, this is a very dated reference. Steele, it might go over your head. I apologize, but there's that scene in Wayne's World where Garth is wearing like Reebok everything, and he talks about how it's really sad that athletes only do things to get paid, and there was some humor there. I'll send it to you on the side, but it always reminds me of that when we go through these things in sports.
Absolutely. All right, we're going to take a quick break. Back with our guy, Steele Chambers. You got about another minute, Steele, to wrap this up. I mean, I know your brain and mind are full of things. You got that sweet eagle on your hat. So why don't you share with the folks where we're at?
Yeah, I'll ask, have you seen The Odyssey yet? The lesson from today is all about perspective, and that's something that The Odyssey does really well. Because, we know these battles, the Trojan War. We know all about the Trojan horse thing that Odysseus came up with. We know kind of the story for the most part if you keep up with Greek mythology, but what the movie does is sort of implement a new form of perspective where we see these as glorious battles, but in the movie they portray it as these just terrible atrocities that kind of going against God or Zeus in that world. So I think perspective is really what I want to talk about today. It's just everyone has a certain view on things, and sometimes we all get caught up on the main objective or the main perspective that things might entail. But I guess keep an open mind, because people might think of certain things, certain events, certain things that happen in your life as differently. But The Odyssey just does a really good job of providing multiple perspectives on something that everyone thinks is already good. But in reality, for a lot of people, that was just a terrible event that happened. So perspective for me is that's the big thing for today.
Denzel Washington said, sometimes bad things happen in your life to open your eyes up to all the good that you've been seeing. And so I love that, Steele. I love where your head's at. So stay locked in here on the Bobby Carpenter Show. Welcome back in the Bobby Carpenter Show. We got our guy Bill Bender of the Sporting News. Check out all his great stuff. They've got some great stuff when it comes to the jersey patches, what schools should be out there with that together. They've got a great one on some pressure in Texas. We'll touch on both of those here with this. Give him a follow on X at Bill Bender 92. And we'll start with the Texas pressure. And Bill, you wrote an article headlined, "Should Texas national title or bust talk be directed more at Arch Manning or Steve Sarkisian?" And Archie Manning, his grandfather, came out and said, Arch didn't ask for any of this, and kind of said he was anointed beforehand. So it was a little bit together. Like, people have heaped on a lot of praise and a lot of expectations, which he didn't deserve the praise, but also maybe didn't deserve the expectations quite to that degree without having really played a lot prior to last season. Now he was supposed to be a one and done, one start year and go. This is his second year, his fourth year now in college. Sark has coached at USC. He's coached at Texas. He coached under Nick Saban. Hasn't necessarily had that big game success in the postseason. And so when we start talking about where the pressure should be, who should it be on more of? Should it be on Sark? Should it be on Arch? I would contend that more of this pressure this year is on Arch Manning. Lift it or leave it, Bill Bender.
I'm going to leave it leave it, Bob, where I'm going to say it's on Sark. And here's why. I think Arch will have all that pressure. I'm not disputing what you're saying. I think the pressure on him is really going to ramp up when he gets to the NFL because of his uncles. And again, not his fault, but it's a natural, hey, Peyton did this his rookie season, Eli did this his rookie season, and it'll just go from there. I actually think Texas has a Cadillac roster with a bunch of transfers like Cam Coleman and Hollywood Smothers and Raleek Brown, and there are all Rasheem Biles on the defensive side. Their roster, we're putting out our preseason All-American team next week. There are a lot of Texas guys on it, and that's a spoiler alert. So that tells me that, if Sark can't get this team on at least a deep playoff run, and he's sitting here next year saying, well, we were 9-3 and should have got in because we played Ohio State, and it's the same thing. If they lose to Ohio State in week 2, it's really going to ramp up in Austin, So I'm going to say Sark, and it's close.
Yeah, I'm going to leave it as well. Just kind of what you said, the amount of guys they have on that roster, I think is better than the team they had whenever they made that deep run and lost to Ohio State. So if you can at least replicate that now that you have Arch Manning at your quarterback, then yeah, that's a disappointing season. This is going to be a national championship or bust year for him. If he doesn't get it this year, then there shouldn't be talks about him getting fired. But just in this landscape of college football, it might be a conversation that pops up. I hope it doesn't, but it's going to be a big year for him.
I'm going to lift this because, and I don't disagree with anything. And like you said, there's plenty of pressure. The article does a great job. You'll check it out on Sporting News of breaking down both sides of it. The one thing, to Steele's point, Sark isn't getting fired unless they go 4-8 this year. That's not going to happen. Peyton didn't win a national championship at Tennessee. They won one the following season. Eli didn't win one at Ole Miss, and they weren't nearly as close. And I think they went 10-2 maybe his final season or his junior year. But both of those guys stayed for 4 years. Both of them played 3 or 4. I think they were both 4-year starters, at least 3. And so there's an expiration on this. And yeah, he could stay another season. I can't really envision that at this point unless he struggles mightily this year. But to me, I think Arch Manning has more of the pressure because he has an expiration on his college career. Sark will have another shot. He'll have another round. And while he'll take a lot of criticism, a lot of heat, Arch has something to do. He has the ability to do something that neither one of his brothers did or his uncles did. And that to me is what changes this a little bit. And it believe me, we're talking 51-49 here. There's the weight of the world that's existing right now in Austin and on both of those guys. And we'll see ultimately what happens with that. To Bill's point, we'll get into this more a little bit tomorrow, some of this patch conversation, and go through his great article with some of the patches that need to happen with the affiliations of different schools. Ohio State went with Chase Bank, and ironically, they no blue on that, even though Chase Banks is blue. And I think a lot of these schools are going to keep color congruency and not change it because you really don't notice it unless there's a pop of a different color. There doesn't need to be any green on Ohio State's or blue or their jersey. Notre Dame went with SoFi, which SoFi is blue, but if they went with someone that had red or like yellow, purple, or like a bright yellow that's not the gold, like you didn't need to see that. But Notre Dame reportedly got around 18 to 19 million. Ohio State got around 17. Neither one of these, per year, by the way, neither one of these schools are going to ever confirm that, or their partners. That's what's rumored. So we can argue that, I guess it's probably in that general vicinity. They'll lift it or leave it. These will be the two highest grossing jersey patches that you will find in college football. Lift it or leave it.
I mean, lift it, unless Texas will probably come up with one that's pretty hefty too. And they're some of the Texas schools, but I don't know what, like you said, we made a joke about Tito's, and Texas does have some heavy hitter corporate sponsors, just like Ohio State does, just like, Notre Dame. And, those are huge companies that they got. I thought Ryan Day had a humorous touch about the blue part too, by the way. That was pretty funny. He knows what he's doing. But I'm going to say, yeah, these will be probably the two highest. Notre Dame, I mean, these are huge numbers. Now, of schools that could probably challenge that, Texas maybe, but it's the brand, the Ohio State brand, the Notre Dame brand, the Texas brand. I'm sure Michigan will come up with something as well, but it won't be quite that high. It'll probably be lucrative, but it won't be quite that high. I believe the suggestion we made for Michigan was tongue-in-cheek, of course. We put Ford because of the connections, obviously, with the auto industry. But then we said maybe, they could troll everybody and put Norton or a cybersecurity company on their patch just to mess with everybody a little bit and get everybody more mad at them.
Well, before I hear your answer on this, Steele, you mentioned Michigan. It wouldn't even surprise me, Bill, if they kind of sit this year out and let everything calm down, because of when you get in a brand partnership, I mean, SoFi and Notre Dame are tied together. You don't want to hear any like financial misgivings from Notre Dame. You don't want to hear the same thing about Chase if you're Ohio State. And conversely, they don't want to see anything happening at those schools. Just like, Georgia, you have all the stuff with guys getting in trouble. I mean, those brand partnerships are real. And with all of the smoke around Michigan right now, Bill, it wouldn't surprise me if they're like, hey, let's let this chill for a year, see if we can go 9-3 with Whittingham, and then re-up this next year and open the books again when everybody's kind of moved on a little bit, just because of all the smoke surrounding it. Steele, your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I'm right there with Bill. I think it's all about marrying two very well-known brands. Ohio State, Notre Dame, I think those are the two biggest brands. Like you said, you could put Michigan in that 3 spot, but they got to kind of smother that flame going on there. It's absolute dumpster fire. But if you have these big brands carrying the weight of now these other big brands coming in, putting their jersey patch on their jersey, I think that's just a match made in heaven. So I don't see anyone else being able to contend with that. Maybe a couple teams can kind of sniff that valuation, but for the most part, I think that number's not really going to get touched anytime soon.
Well, and I wanted to add real quick, I think my alma mater, Ohio University, should absolutely add a burrito buggy or Goodfellas pizza patch, and it might not be quite as lucrative as JP Morgan Chase, but there's no doubt that if they threw a little burrito buggy on there, it'd be much cooler in some ways.
Well, I mean, we get you a little Rocky Boots. I mean, Nelson just down the way.
Yeah, they got some good sponsors down there. But I mean, that's every school's got it's a me making light of it, and but every school's going to look into this and try to find extra money to put. I also made the joke yesterday to one of my editors. I said, "What's Oregon going to do? Just put another Nike patch on there?" And, there's like one on the left and one on the right. I mean, they'll figure out something at Oregon.
Bobby Carpenter Show brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Baseball fans, think you know who's hitting a homer today? Well, FanDuel is giving you a free chance to call your shot with daily dingers. Join the action is easy. Just make your free pick on who's hitting the home run in the game. And if you're right, you'll get a profit boost you can use for your next bet for a chance for extra winnings. You've got nothing to lose and a lot to gain. Don't forget, you make a free pick every day during the Major League Baseball season. It's just another reason why FanDuel is the home for home runs. So are you ready to play your game today? Join the action by FanDuel.com/bigplay. That's FanDuel.com/bigplay for daily dingers to make your free pick of who's hitting a homer. Play ball and swing for the fences on FanDuel, official partner of Major League Baseball. Must be 21 or older. in select states for Kansas in affiliation with Kansas Star Casino, 18 and older in DC, Kentucky, Wyoming. No purchase necessary, opt-in required. Bonus issue is non-withdrawable profits boost tokens. Restrictions apply, including any token expiration and max wager amount. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com.
Philly had issues elsewhere last year that were on full display in the playoff game against the Niners. They couldn't move the ball all game, and then they got in a 2-minute hurry-up drill, and they walked right down the field. Guys, Tom Brady would do Eagle games. Every single week he'd go, gosh, if they do some hurry-up. And then immediately they'd do some hurry-up, 2-minute warning, and they'd look like a completely different football team.
In-game live, only on SportsGrid.
You know, the dark days are ahead for the Warriors. And when Curry and Kerr and Draymond all leave, what are we going to be looking at that franchise that has been a mainstay of the NBA, you know, the face of the NBA and NBA playoffs for so long? Where are they going to be? So I see no issue with them bringing Draymond back. Why not? You have one last go at things with the trio that they still have there. But I see this as a very long season.
Game time decisions, only on SportsGrid.
Just can't win the big game. He can't get us in the big game. Well, we got to let him go now because we're tired. We'll keep the quarterback. So, you know what I've been saying? Okay, you kept the quarterback. Guess what? Mr. Lamar Jackson, it's on you now.
Hey, absolutely.
It's on you.
Absolutely.
Right? It's on Lamar.
It is. It is totally on him now and the new coaching staff there.
Outspoken with Dan Cilio, only on SportsGrid.
I'd be looking to sell Louis Varland at this point just because his success has been great, but I'm also worried about how many more opportunities he's going to have given the dynamic of where the Blue Jays sit in the standings. You know, we've heard some rumors that they may be wanting to trade Jeff Hoffman, and it could open up a lot of opportunities for Louis Varland, but there's also nothing pushing the Blue Jays to continuously have out a great player when they're fighting for nothing when it's all said and done.
Pro Baseball Today, only on SportsGrid.
So Heather Dinich, ESPN reporter, does a great job, and she's been bouncing around still all of these different media days, starting with the Big 12, ACC, SEC, and now ultimately the Big 10, which is kicking off today in Chicago. And I was looking at her Instagram yesterday, and she had 3 big predictions that she wanted to throw out there for college football. So, Pat, when we get a chance, throw that up. Here it is, her 3 predictions. Indiana alum, and she's a Big Ten girl. Like, I love Heather. She's one of the people that give her a lot, to throw a lot of shade at her. She still is legit one of the nicest people around and just loves covering football. Like, she doesn't have what she talks about the SEC and people. She has this bias. Like, dude, she went to Indiana. Like, she's a Midwest. Like, she just really loves football. An awesome person, great family, everything you want. And so here's her 3 big predictions heading into Big Ten Media Days.
Where I've got 3 big predictions for you. 1, Ohio State is going to beat Oregon to win the Big Ten title. 2, USC is going to be in the college football playoff. And 3, the Big Ten streak of winning the national title is going to end because I'm going to give it to Texas, Georgia, or Notre Dame.
Okay.
Wow.
Your
In
thoughts.
Indiana.
Let's break down that first one. Ohio State going to beat Oregon, and that'll catapult them into winning the Big Ten championship.
That I could see that. I think they're the 2 premium teams in the Big Ten. You've got other guys like Indiana, maybe Michigan tries to make a run for it, but I think they are kind of out in front of everybody. Ohio State, like that's gonna take a lot of willpower to get over to get over the Oregon Ducks. I feel like they've got a lot returning. I feel like we've got a lot of new players stepping up in new situations, but they're going to be able to handle that challenge. So I think that's a very good prediction. Ohio State, Oregon, kind of just – I feel like that's more of it's kind of a rivalry that's starting to develop now over the past 2 or 3 years. So that would be a good game if it ends up happening. And, of course, I like Ohio State winning it all.
I like it. So we'll talk about that. Do you think Ohio State Steele? And here's the other interesting, because they play Indiana at Indiana. They have Oregon at home. So that's the return trip from 2 years ago where the clock ran out. And unfortunately, Will wasn't able to get a spike. And they lose that game, I think, by a point out there. So there's that. They also have to go to USC. And then there's always Michigan floating around out there. Like, they've got a very tough schedule. Do you think beating Oregon – if you were confident you knew they'd beat Oregon, do you think that that's still enough to win the Big Ten, knowing the rest of their schedule?
If they beat Oregon in the regular season?
Yes.
Ugh.
Or maybe she's saying they beat them in the playoff, or in the Big Ten championship, which would be even more interesting. Maybe
I thought that's what she said, that Ohio State beats Oregon in the Big Ten championship.
Okay. She said they beat Oregon. Maybe I'm not listening there very well. So Ohio State winning the Big Ten, beating Oregon, rematch there'd be a rematch from the regular season. So is it better to win the first, lose the second, win the second, lose the first? I don't know how that works with the sweep, but Ohio State also has a very, very tough schedule. Our second takeaway, was
USC
making the playoff this year, which also on Ohio State's schedule, which is why I kind of brought that up. She thinks Ohio State's going to win the Big Ten. I mean, that's probably a loss to USC. You could probably only withstand one more. Do you think she's accurate with USC making the playoff?
I hope she's accurate with USC making the playoffs. I want them to be good. I had that whole scuffle with Bryson earlier on in the offseason. Like, I want them to succeed, especially now that they're in the Big Ten and they have the brand where they should be succeeding. I think Lincoln Riley is a great coach. They always have good talent. So there's no reason for them not to be in the playoffs, but it's just going to take a little bit extra with everything going on in their schedule. I think it's pretty tough, but it's not up to the standards of Ohio State, Michigan. But if they're able to get to 11-1, 10-2, and they've got a couple signature wins, especially if somehow they take us down on Halloween night, then yeah, they get in the playoffs, which I'd love to see.
Well, I was talking to Phil Steele today, and he said, Lincoln Riley felt a lot more confident in their defense. Their defense has been bad, Steele, as we know, for so long. And that's part of it is he hasn't put the emphasis on it. Like, if you're the head coach, dude, you're not the head coach of the offense. You're the head coach of the entire football team. And so if they're not playing well on one side of the ball, you've got to get that corrected. You've got to get that fixed. They haven't gotten it fixed yet. I mean, lose Jade Maava could potentially be a first-round draft pick at the end of the season, which very, very talented player, and so I'm not debating that. Got some growth. I think it would be good for the Big Ten to get USC in there. I'm hoping, Steele, that USC would be the fourth team. So you have Ohio State, Oregon, Indiana, and then USC. So you'd get the four in there, which I think would be a huge boon for the Big Ten to be able to get that. Now, who else gets in around them, and what do they do in the tournament? Well, that's another big piece as well. Then lastly, Texas winning the national championship. Ohio State plays Texas the second game this year down in Austin on top of the 4 incredibly tough Big Ten games. A lot of people having a top 10 or top 5 schedule toughness when it comes to rankings. Texas winning it all. Sark's been close. 2 years in a row, he's in the Final Four. Lost to Ohio State, obviously, 2 years ago. Last year, they did not make it at 9-3. They go 10-2 and don't lose to Ohio State, they get in. Or they play somebody else and win, they get in. What are your thoughts on Texas winning it all?
That's not crazy at all. I think a theme this upcoming season as far as successful teams is returning talent, and Texas has that. They have Colin Simmons, who's going to be a first-rounder. Arch Manning, who's trying to prove himself as a number one overall pick type of player. So on both sides of the ball, they've got a lot of pieces that are going to be returning. They've got a lot of experience. So I think that they're going to do great this year. Of course, I think that Ohio State-Texas game, that's going to be really a benchmark to see where both of those teams at. But Texas, if they get into the playoffs, then it's anyone's game. Once you get in, you have the opportunity to win it all. Another thing that I think is just brave on her part, an Indiana alum saying that Notre Dame also has a big chance to win national championship. Like, if people say she's biased and she's coming out and saying that, then you got to rescind that comment, because that takes a lot of heart right there to say that.
Well, what's interesting is I think everybody thought, if you're an SEC fan, you're like Texas, Georgia, or Notre Dame. And I was waiting, was she going to say like Bama? Is she going to throw Ole Miss in there? And she went with Notre Dame, which Notre Dame has some of the best odds to make it. I think they're just below Ohio State, as Pat threw that up there from our friends over at FanDuel. And look at Notre Dame, then you have Oregon, Texas, Georgia, and then ultimately Indiana. So in the top, 6, there's 3 Big Ten, 2 SEC, and Notre Dame obviously being an independent. But that's very interesting, because when she said Texas, Georgia, I thought she's like the SEC is going to end their reign. Well, maybe, but it also might be ended by Notre Dame, who obviously lost to Ohio State 2 years ago in the national championship. And by the way, just like Texas didn't make it in next year. All right, we're going to go through this now and break down ESPN put out their playoff predictors. So they've got their chances to make the CFP. They've got chances to get a first-round bye, and then the chance to win the whole darn thing. We'll break all that down for you here coming up next on the Bobby Carpenter Show. We're just talking about, they had their odds out there that you could bet on. ESPN, they've got their prediction tracker and everything else that they have out there with how they do it. And so, Pat, when you get a chance to throw this up, chance to make the CFP. Here we go. We've got Ohio State at the top, 76%. I mean, that's 3/4, man. Wow. That's pretty darn good. Notre Dame right a couple points behind them. Texas at 70. Oregon at 65. Georgia at 64. What's interesting is Indiana's all the way down there at 8 at 57%, but their odds have them at 6. And so that might be the difference between computers and public markets of how they look at it. But Miami and Texas Tech, 6 and 7, Bama 9, LSU 10. No Ole Miss in there, not till the back end. When you see this deal, kind of what teams stick out, what teams jump out, and maybe the percentage that they have of actually getting in the CFP.
Texas Tech immediately stood out to me. I figured their numbers would dwindle a little bit with everything going on, but I guess there's still obviously some confidence over there in Lubbock, Texas. Miami, a team that no one's really talked about, I feel like, even after the Darian Mensah pickup whenever they got him from the transfer portal. I thought there was going to be a little more talk behind them, so I'm glad that they have such strong odds because I think they do have a lot of talent coming back, and then they've got their transfer quarterback who's going to be great. Oh, gosh. Georgia, they're always at the top. They're just not sexy like these other guys. They've just played like hard-nosed football. Just they know how to win games. Oklahoma and Ole Miss, those are kind of my two underdogs, I feel like, in the SEC. I'm surprised they don't have kind of better odds, but I guess the math, you just can't have everyone in 50% odds to get into the playoffs. So I would say those 4 or 5 teams are really the ones that stand out at me.
What was the last one you said?
I said Oklahoma and Ole Miss. I feel like they kind of should have higher odds there.
Oklahoma, I think for sure, or not Oklahoma. Ole Miss, I think for sure. I really like Trinidad Chambers. It's going to be interesting to see how they end up working the offense with Lane Kiffin gone and a lot of that offensive staff. The fact that Clemson's on there, Steele, do you know what Clemson's over/under win total is? I believe on FanDuel.
I'll go with 8.5.
I think it's 7 or 7.5. I've seen it move
really?
A little bit. But yeah, the fact that they say they're 17th best odds to make it, but a lot of people have their win totals. I've checked some other books as well. I mean, that thing's sitting around 7.5. I have not even seen it to 8. So that is amazing to me that they have them sitting there in 17.
I would probably say that's just the Dabo effect, which I don't really know if he has that effect anymore. He doesn't have the same pull that he did back in the late 2010s. So, yeah, that's very interesting now, especially that the ACC, they're starting to have a couple teams, I guess, take the reins a little bit. You got Miami, SMU's been doing pretty good. Pitt does pretty good. So I am surprised that they still have those odds whenever they've got more teams coming out of the ACC that are doing better than them.
So a couple other things on this list. Number 10, LSU. Number 15, Michigan, 16, Ole Miss, 17, Clemson, 18, Penn State. Do you know what they all have, those 5 teams have in common?
New coaches.
They're, bingo, man. You're a sharp guy. Interesting to see that all 5 of those schools have new coaches. Now we'll flip to the next sheet here and look at their chances to have a first-round bye. And so you're going to probably look at these things and think that they're in the same order. This is where it gets a little interesting is Ohio State, Texas, Georgia, Oregon, Notre Dame still at the top. But Notre Dame has slid down significantly. Texas Tech has disappeared from the top 10. And who else? Was it Texas? No, Texas is number 2. Who else slid off there? That may have been it. Yeah, that was it. But A&M slides in at number 10. And you have Texas Tech sitting back there now at 11. And so it's interesting, like, because it's a fine line of, like, how good they think you are, how good they think your schedule is, and how much weight that's ultimately going to carry.
Yeah, and the team I noticed was Notre Dame. I feel like that's because they don't have a conference. So even though they might go 11-1, 12-0, they won't have a conference championship to hang over their heads and show the world. So that's the reason why they might not get a first-round bye. But, yeah, for the most part, I feel like there's not really too much change. Yeah, you said the Texas Tech, they slid. That's if they win the Big 12, that's not as much weight as – actually, no, if they win the Big 12, they do get a bye. So I think this is pretty accurate for the most part. I don't really see any changes I would make.
Bobby Carpenter Show brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Baseball fans, think you know who's hitting a homer today? Well, FanDuel is giving you a free chance to call your shot with daily dingers. Join the action is easy. Just make your free pick on who's hitting the home run in the game. And if you're right, you'll get a profit boost you can use for your next bet for a chance for extra winnings. You've got nothing to lose and a lot to gain. Don't forget, you make a free pick every day during the Major League Baseball season. It's just another reason why FanDuel is the home for home runs. So are you ready to play your game today? Join the action. Like FanDuel.com/bigplay. That's FanDuel.com/bigplay for daily dingers to make your free pick of who's hitting a homer. Play ball and swing for the fences on FanDuel, official partner of Major League Baseball. Must be 21 or older in select states. For Kansas, in affiliation with Kansas Star Casino, 18 or older in D.C., Kentucky, Wyoming. No purchase necessary. Opt-in required. Bonus issue is non-withdrawable profits boost tokens. Restrictions apply.
Philly had issues elsewhere last year that were on full display in the playoff game against the Niners. They couldn't move the ball all game, and then they got in a 2-minute hurry-up drill, and they walked right down the field. Guys, Tom Brady would do Eagle games. Every single week he'd go, gosh, if they do some hurry-up. And then immediately they'd do some hurry-up, 2-minute warning, and they'd look like a completely different football team.
In-game live, only on SportsGrid.
You know, the dark days are ahead for the Warriors. And when Curry and Kerr and Draymond all leave, what are we going to be looking at that franchise that has been a mainstay of the NBA, you know, the face of the NBA and NBA playoffs for so long? Where are they going to be? So I see no issue with them bringing Draymond back. Why not? You have one last go at things with the trio that they still have there. But I see this as a very long season.
Game time decisions only on SportsGrid.
Just can't win the big game. He can't get us in the big game. Well, we got to let him go now because we're tired. We'll keep the quarterback. So, you know what I've been saying? Okay, you kept the quarterback. Guess what? Mr. Lamar Jackson, it's on you now.
Hey,
It's on you.
Absolutely.
Right? It's on Lamar.
It is totally on him now and the new coaching staff there.
Outspoken with Dan Cilio, only on SportsGrid.
I'd be looking to sell Louis Varland at this point just because his success has been great, but I'm also worried about how many more opportunities he's going to have given the dynamic of where the Blue Jays sit in the standings. You know, we've heard some rumors that they may be wanting to trade Jeff Hoffman, and it could open up a lot of opportunities for Louis Varland, but there's also nothing pushing the Blue Jays to continue